I'm so delighted to be joined not only by my business partner, Velka Powell, but also two amazing women, Natasha and Deborah Stradbrink. Hi, ladies. Thank you so much again for being willing to join us in tonight's conversation.
You're welcome.
So before we get into talking, the purpose behind this conversation is joining a theme that we have adopted to explore over this week, which is actually Race Equality Week. It's documented in the annual calendar as a national event of just acknowledging something that I think is quite a sensitive subject. And we're looking for opportunities to explore such a wider remit with regards to this topic. And we brought the two of you today because actually you share something very interesting in common. And I'm going to say it now that actually Deborah and Natasha are in fact biological sisters. They have the same parents, same family, and clearly their appearance is quite different. And with that in mind, I know, and we can imagine, and we're hoping to find out from their story today, that actually that comes with perhaps complexities that many don't usually associate when we talk about what's usually publicized or acknowledged during weeks like Race Equality Week. So I just want to thank you, ladies, for being willing to share your authentic stories with us and just be vulnerable with regards to understanding your story. So thank you so much. Before I go into my questions, and they are being quite a serious subject, I do like to start off with a icebreaker type question. If you guys were to describe or have a superpower, what would your superpower be? If you had a superpower, what would be your choice of superpower?
I don't actually go in for the Marvel characters, but
Go, Deborah.
But my nephew
Teleportation.
Teleportation. Why? Why teleportation?
So that I can get to and see every single thing in the world that needs to be seen, because it's very difficult being human and not being able to just go to the forest in the far east, or the majesty of the mountains in the west, or the cold in the north, or
I love that. That's incredible. I do like that. Will certainly be a lot
Deborah,
cheaper on travel as well.
I'm not one for thinking
of yes,
but my nephew watched Marvel character Wonder Woman, and he saw them fighting, and he said what he thought of us. So I think I'm going to go with Wonder Woman.
Interesting. Like, is it because she has that lasso of truth, or the fact that she's got ridiculous strength? Like, is there a particular element about Wonder Woman, or it is just the courage?
I just think, well, she can teleport, Natasha, and she's outlives every generation, so she sees everything.
She really does.
You know, just being everywhere.
yes, good for her.
I like that. That's really fun. Thank you for indulging me with those. I always think that's a really nice way to start the conversation. So I'm going to start off on our questions for you guys now. And this is something for the both of you to consider. And my first question is, how does it feel to be both British as well as be born in another country? How does it feel to be both British as well as being born in another country? I will start with you on that one, if you don't mind, Deborah.
What is it like to be both British and it depends. I think it's culturally, you have to take that into consideration as well. I would say that you'll tend to lean towards one more than the other. Well, in my case, but I am both. I lean to more my British side because for various reasons, which I'm sure we're going to uncover in this conversation. So, and it's difficult to realize when you're born in a nation that without realizing it, you're through a process of osmosis experiencing another culture within a culture. You just find out that there is a difference in you. There's a difference in all of us, but there's a distinct difference, an expectation, and the way you think and the way you process stuff, because your environment, your home, your cultural environment clashes with the natural environment that you're in. So, you kind of feel, well, for myself, like a square peg in a round hole.
That's really interesting.
When you come into the other culture, you realize, oh no, this fits better. this fits better.
That's so interesting. Thank you for sharing that. Natasha, what about you?
I don't know that I was fully aware of it until you are aware of it, until a situation arises. So it's just it's the norm for you until something occurs where you go, oh, okay. But the norm, it was the norm, and the exceptions were very rare. So it wasn't something that I was fully aware of until I left. Um, and then I was able to see it and process it and look at it. But while I was there, it wasn't something that I was consciously aware of every day or in any specific moments. There were, but similar to Deborah, there's a feeling of not quite fitting as such,
Yeah.
but not overtly so.
Mm.
Mm.
And that, I think that would make sense, wouldn't it? Because you're just existing. This is the life you were born into. It happened to have
Yes,
parallel
yes, yes,
contributions that were quite far apart.
yes.
I think it will be really good for our audience to understand that if they haven't picked up an accent already, that not only have you told us that you are British as well, but you were born in,
In
say, South Africa. So, which is a stunning, stunning place. And I know, historically speaking, even recently, historically speaking, has come with its own dynamics and, how would we say, traumas that people have heard about all over the world many times over. Anyone that just scratches the surface, or you mention the name Nelson Mandela, people have a lot of associations and understanding the culture that was in such a beautiful place, which I think is at odds with its beauty. Because as stunning as it is, it has wonderful oceans, mountains. It also comes with the cultural backdrop, historically speaking, of apartheid, which was abolished only in the 90s, which really isn't that long ago. I was wondering, could you describe a little bit about what that was like living in apartheid South Africa? Because you grew up in that era.
Natasha, would you like to go first?
um, I think we have very different experiences. We come out of the same household. Um, for me, it was not a focus. It was, I never paid attention. I had far more concerned about. It didn't touch me as much as it did my siblings because I came in at the end of it, um, from a legal point of view, where the law had said it ended. Um, Culturally, I was at school, so I was cocooned and in a bubble during that period. And the few interactions that I had with things like that, it didn't touch me from a point of reality or interest because I was just focused somewhere else. So this is more, Deborah has more of a real time. She lived this more than I did.
Mm.
Would you say,
Yes, I
Deborah?
did. And Natasha's quite right. When you are in school environment, it can be quite a bubble for you. I was in the generation where it invaded the school space. You know, when we were attacked, when the army was released into us, and when the riots was there. So the dimension of it was very different. So the cocoon was broken, and we were in the 1976 riots at the time, and it was really, really frightening to live in it, in that particular era. But overall, if you're asking how was it to live in the apartheid time, it's very difficult to live because unless you've lived in apartheid, you can't fully understand it because it's not a black and white issue only. There are layers of it. And I don't think people fully understand that. When you come to a country, you're either black or you're white, and that's how they see it. There's no in-between kind of situation. But in South Africa with apartheid, there are layers to it. There are grading systems within it. And the law itself is very black and white. So when I say in the administration of the laws, and so it's very difficult to find your place when you are and in the situation that we are, Natasha and I are. It's very difficult to find a place enhanced with the national cultural difference. I think we might not have been, like she said quite correctly, that you're not aware of it. You're not it's there all the time, but you're not fully comprehending what it is until you've experienced. Once you experience something else, you realize, oh, that was the feeling I was going through. That was my challenge. I can now see it. I couldn't see it then, but I understand it now. And so it's very difficult living in South Africa where you're either on one side or another for myself. And so the law determined this was it, and you got to live it. It's just very difficult to explain it on in a 5 minutes, 10 minutes sitting. You know,
but I think even in your descriptions of the both of you, I think even though I'm not saying it, but we can infer just from the weight of how difficult it is to try to describe it, we can sense that there is a depth to that type of complexity that perhaps I think certainly here in the UK, we're certainly not engaging with that to the way that you're describing. And back to your point about just an understanding about apartheid really separated its people through a series of laws and clauses that were particular to separating people in particular groups according to the gradient of their skin tone. So we can gather by looking at the appearance of yourself and Natasha that you were clearly a mixed family. But how did it feel being someone like yourself who apparently would appear therefore to a mixed group of people by law, but your appearance, having blonde hair and green eyes, would actually say that you belonged to another group? What was it like kind of dealing with that in apartheid during that time?
I'm not the only one in South Africa there's loads of us like this in that. And it's very difficult just to give you a little bit of understanding about our family, so that you can understand. Our family is British and Irish. Both our grandparents are British and Irish, so on that side. Then the one grandfather, his wife died, and he married a mixed race woman, and from that mixed race, we were all of us. Sophia, there's always one dark-haired one in all of us, and we just my father, when he met my mother, he came over from his parents came from the United Kingdom, went to St. Helena, and when his father was working in the Navy in South Africa in the Second World War, he brought his family over. So when my father wanted to marry my mother, when they stood at the altar, this is according to my father's story, but he's not alive to share this right now. And they asked him, are you married? Are you white? So my father had a beautiful hue of skin. My mother was the fair one. And my mother said, I'm mixed. There was no such thing as mixed. So my father said, no, I'm white. And he was the one that was the one. He said, no, I'm white. And she was mixed. They said, well, we can't marry you then. So he said, well, then if she's what she is, I'm going to be what she is. And that's how they put it down that's how it came about. So the family dynamics are that part of the family living a white, classified white, and part of them, it's not called mixed, they're coloured. And so what happens is the families become split and they have to live separately. And within a family, a son and a daughter can be separate races within. So there are so many layers to that impacts the community itself. And it's very divisive, not only on a colour issue, in every way possible. I don't know if you can verify any of that, Natasha, from a legal point of view. I know you did not experience that yourself.
I agree with you. It is divisive because it wasn't just about the law. The damage is done at the family level, because
Absolutely.
for someone to visit a grandparent who was who had chosen a different set situation, you could have two lots of people turning at a home, which would then cause them an inconvenience, um, because the questions would be raised because there was such an awareness of that. Um, so yes, to explain it, you survive it. You don't
You live
you
it.
don't explain it. You live it and you carry on.
That's beautifully said.
And I find that really interesting because, do correct me if I'm wrong, it made it sound as if, to an extent, it was a choice that you essentially had to make. It wasn't just, the outward physical features of, someone looking colored, or black or white. It was kind of a choice in regards to which path you took in order to bridge that family relations. Is that?
No,
It wasn't a
we had to make a choice as a so mixed families had a choice. The others didn't. The middle group, they had to choose at some point, and they did it for various reasons. Is that right, Deborah? It's our group of people. I call them the boat people because they all came over on the boat. So the boat people had to choose, whether it be for love, money, whatever. Just yeah.
But in saying that, what is difficult is that my grandparents, because when Apartheid came in, they were there from the inception. When they came in, they lived within a community that, because of their status within the community, they managed to live freely within that community, which is very difficult because they were, you might say they were privileged, but they weren't actually privileged because at any time that was revoked because they didn't have legal rights in that way. But we come from the next generation after that, where, for example, a silly example, they weren't allowed to go to theatres. You weren't allowed to go to a certain eating place. You couldn't go to a restaurant. So those kind of things my family had access to because of my grandparents and their standing within their community. But because of that, you're not really accepted. You're known for who you are, but we, the next generation, we didn't have that kind of privilege. Then it was harder for us. And not that we would have wanted it, but we were neither or either.
Yeah. And if possible, can you tell us about the emotional baggage that can have on someone having to be in that in between phase? You're not this one, you're not that one. What kind of emotions are brought up as a result? Natasha.
My sister and I always refer to us as she's fight and I'm flight. Okay. I do the runner. I avoid it completely. I do not discuss it. But like all things, it comes out in your everyday life, or people who know, and people who don't know. So until this very moment in time, I have not discussed. I do not discuss what was or or what happened or what it did or how it affects your adult life or um no. It's I avoided properly. I did it well. I get a medal for my absolute avoidance. So I'm going to pass the question over to my sister because she doesn't have the stench of it hanging on her. She's come through the other side of it because she addressed it, not me. And that in itself is an answer to your question.
No, thank you.
In relation to emotion and anything that and goes with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's two
Deborah?
emotions live on the surface that you can just think straight away. It's anger and it's hatred. You live with it every day. You breathe it every day. You taste it every day. You feel it every day. You hate the system that's trying to define you, and you're angry with society because they're perpetuating it, and it's like a no way out. if I'm walking on the road and I've got to look at her face, there's hatred in her and anger at me. It just builds up inside of you. You don't realize, but you can sense it in every pore and fiber of your being. It's anger and it's hatred. So that's the emotions you feel, and you have to navigate it every day.
And I guess on the flip side of that, what are things that you celebrate about being, you know, I'll quote unquote in the middle? What are things that you celebrate, that you love about your identity, about the community you have created and you are a part of?
It is a privileged position I have, because it's not just two nationalities, it's two cultures that's inside of myself. Although I fit better in England, for the English, I'm South African. For the South African, I'm just someone that's a problem in the country. A rebel, they call me a rebel, yes. I was rebellious. They said I was rebellious. I refused to conform. I fought it every step of the way. So I was termed as rebellious. But you live in a liminal state, and there are advantages. The disadvantages are each culture, whether it be talking about and being South African culture wants you to disown the other side of yourself. In order to fit in, you have to deny your identity. So you have a choice, either one. So you barely live amongst them. You live, but you don't connect really. It's hard to connect. And it's hard for them to connect to you, because in order for you to connect with them, you must embrace it completely. And you can't, because we are not wired like that. Our cultural environment has wired us differently, and the very respect that they would like, they cannot afford us for our individuality. So it is great because we are individuals, and when we understand that and we can embrace that, but we understand that we actually have the ability to walk into camps.
Yeah, no, definitely.
And it's actually an asset. There's a story in the Bible about a man called Moses, and he's a Jew, born as a Hebrew, and he's many people know the story. He's raised up in Pharaoh's house in Egypt, and he lives in a liminal state. But when the time came for the liberation of his people, he was not accepted by his people. They could not take. It took a man who was not tainted by the hardships and the mindset to set
Of a
him
slave, yeah.
of slave to set them free. So there are advantages of a liminal state. It can be lonely, but there are many like you as well if you can be true to yourself.
Certainly. No, thank you for that beautiful response. And I come to you, Natasha. What are things that you celebrate about being in that liminal state?
But do I celebrate it? Deborah?
Do you?
I don't know. Do I celebrate it?
Because you are the surprise package, baby. Everyone looks at you and they said, and then when you open the packet, it's wow, it's just not what they expected. And that's what I love. And in South Africa, when because Natasha was so, can I speak, Natasha? Say this?
Italy. Yeah.
This is my view of watching Natasha. Natasha said, and rightly so, that when she was growing up, while you're at school, you're kind of in a cocoon still. Natasha, when she came out of, she didn't want to go to university. She went to another nation. She went to Israel, to the Moshavs. She missed out the whole experience of what the transition of really living in this country would do. But when she came back as an adult, I think it floored her. And everyone tried to impose their identity on her. And they just couldn't. They couldn't understand why she didn't have the mindset, why she wasn't had the concepts, the philosophy. She was very much an individual within this environment that could only understand you in a one-dimensional way. And we are very multidimensional, but they could only see you in that way, and they had the expectation, the stereotype of what she should be. And she just lived out of it, and she had to fight it. But it was hard to watch her fight it. And I remember saying in our conversation, Natasha, this is what it's like when you're living here. You're experiencing it now. And I think
I
she
found it
understood
lonely. I found it a lonely, very lonely existence. Really not. I wouldn't recommend it at all. But it does allow us a choice, and for that I'm eternally grateful. That I celebrate, because for me, having a choice, most people don't. So yes, from a celebration point of view, not so much. No,
No,
it's
thank
just
you for that.
lonely.
No, thank you for being really transparent and honest. And I think, a lot of people who are biracial, who are do coincide with those feelings, not sometimes it's not celebrated or sometimes it is, depending on, I guess, the culture and the community that's around and the history behind you as well. So I'm very, very grateful for you being so transparent and honest about that, because I know it's not easy to admit something like that on such a sensitive topic.
I would question, how did it feel, navigating people's responses towards you when they realized that the two of you were related to each other? Because like I said, you could live in this choice, and I imagine in the choice that Deborah could kind of perhaps go to places. She mentioned earlier that some restaurants or places of work or places that were shared by maybe someone of, fairer skin tones or the white community, according to the legal jargon of apartheid, then she could go there. But the minute that you were together as sisters, like, how did you navigate it when people realized that actually you were related, and therefore put a question mark actually on the racial box per se that you belong to? How did you guys navigate that together?
I'm going to start this, Deborah. I was only a kid, and so I was the teddy that they tagged around, right? Because I was a kid, so I got dragged around by whichever one. So they would have more of an answer on that, because I was just a kid who was turning up. I can only remember one incident as a child where there was a situation, and I didn't feel any adverse feelings when it occurred, but knew that it had happened. Other than that one incident as a child, I don't actually remember anything else. Deborah would know more about that side.
You're on mute, Deborah.
Am I correct in saying that incident was at my work, Natasha?
No.
Not the one you at my work. Okay.
The only significant, sorry, I should have said the only significant incident is I remember one, and that the work one was not of significance. It was of significance for you, which is why I think you should answer the question.
Would you mind sharing what that incident was, Natasha?
No. Yes, actually, I would.
Okay, no problem.
I remember when I was working and Natasha came to my work one day. Obviously, I had to have a code of ethics for myself. It's an internal thing you have to do for yourself. I'm going to treat everyone with respect, from the postman, the boy that delivers, the gentleman that delivers my mail, to the manager. I treat everybody the same, with the same level of respect. Natasha does it as well, with the same level of disrespect. Am I right, baby?
I am an equal opportunities offender.
I was just equal opportunities. So you do that. So when I come in, I never, because it's a lonely road, you appear very friendly with everyone, but you're actually not at all giving anything of yourself away. And Natasha came into my work that day, and when she came in, the receptionist, I came in, I just said, "Oh, hi, this is my sister," and I walked on, and she was standing with her mouth open, looking at us as we walked by. And Natasha said to me, I don't know if you can remember, but said to me, why did she look like that to us? And I just said, they're just ignorant. They don't understand love. This is love, I said to her. And we just left it at that. But I was angry that my sister had to be subject to that. I was angry that they had no control of themselves as an adults, even if they wanted to just, So I was angry about that. You touched my sister, then you're going to touch me in a very sensitive place.
And just continuing on that vein, and we can see that genetics have blessed your family with its diversity. I imagine that, like, if this is the kind of outworking that genetics were doing in your family, it really was just a bit of a mystery surprise as to what would come out in terms of physical appearance. Deborah, would you say that, do your children share the same skin tone as yourself? What has happened for you subsequent to that time?
Do I look old enough to have children? Oh my word.
I do know that you have children. Would you do?
Daughters. I've got 3 beautiful daughters, and their skin tone varied. It was very annoying growing up in a. One of the things I must
Oh
say.
my God.
Oh my God!
Are
What?
you okay? Are you okay?
Speak, Natasha. You can hear us?
I think she can. Yeah, just go ahead.
Say, dating in South Africa is dangerous. Our family.
I don't have anything to say.
About what?
No.
About
you're breaking up.
Oh, okay. You can edit that, eh?
Yes, we can edit it all. So, do you want to just repeat the question? Do you want me to repeat
dear
the question?
God.
I'll repeat the question. So, like, Deborah, I understand you have children, and we've seen you coming from a mixed family. The mystery as to what your children or subsequent children of relatives might look like is something that everyone would just have to wait and see what would happen. So I would ask you, do your children share your skin tone or appearance? What's that been like for you, and how did that make you feel?
I've got to just give you a bit of add something to this. Dating and courting in South Africa is very difficult. You can't get married across what they termed the line. You couldn't. There was no legal marriages, although we married, and the Methodists married us. And it was the 2:00 morning raids that made our family have to leave the country, and because you cannot live under that strain and that stress and that pressure. But they did it. So when I'm dating my husband, who is a man of color, we would have private police, stopping us, and it becomes a nightmare. So I married the man of color, and I've got 3 beautiful children, daughters, and one is fair, but she looks just like her father. And the other one looks more the looks of my family, but they're in between. And the thing that annoyed me most in South Africa was when I went to go to the doctor or the nurses or for immunization or for the vaccinations. People in South Africa are really, they don't really have boundaries that they respect. If they want to comment on your child and your personal things, they'll just do that. And they would say, it's an Afrikaans saying, and I'm going to try and translate it. It won't sound as offensive when I translate it, but it says, everything of the father and nothing of the mother. And I mean, that was just a red flag to a bull. And that was my firstborn. They would say everything of the father and nothing of the mother. They didn't know the father, but just seeing her and the difference would make them say that. Many years later, people who saw them when they were little and they were older, the 2 of them, performing at some event, they came back away and said, wow, your girls are just like you, to me. And that was one of the greatest compliments someone could give me at the time, because they saw them as individuals, not as friends. They were just like me.
I think that's such an interesting concept, and I think it adds further complexity because I think a lot of discussion around diversity and representation is that a lot of people feel that sometimes they can't see themselves in leaders or in their teachers or immediate role models. And I think in a family dynamic that you've described, where it's these are my children are born to me, they may not share my appearance, but I'm still their mother. I'm still that person that's actually meant to represent a form of identity for them. And if you think about it, that concept actually puts a very big, complex conundrum, isn't it, about what representation should really mean. And this is not to say that one is correct and one is correct, or one is like mutually exclusive one for the other. But it does pose that actually perhaps we need to consider it with a wider lens about what does that mean, especially when it comes to figuring out who's my identity. I imagine with your daughters, they would see you as the first port of call of what it means to be a mother, what it means to be a woman in this world in terms of everything else that you need for just general life. And having different skin color to yourself, and then the world telling you that you are therefore this in this box only, but actually your family member, the closest thing to you, like your mother or your child, is apparently supposed to be separate from you, is incredibly complex. And I think you've highlighted perhaps we do need to revisit how we are viewing that with not so linear a kind of approach to that thought. Have you ever heard in response how perhaps your daughters who look different to you, especially the one that you described has, more resemblance of the darker skin tone of your husband, how do they feel about how they navigated that with you? Have they ever shared how they have felt perhaps looking different in resemblance to yourself?
They did feel slightly different. I don't think that was the biggest problem because children innately are not really conscious of of
Color.
racial issues, color, yes. But they want to be like their mum, or they want to look like their dad, or they want to. So that is a normal situation with children. They do.
Mm.
Growing older, though, became a bit of a more challenging for them because once you start at university, um, you know, every race wants to capture them and make them theirs. And like Natasha said, I'm the fighter, I fight. My advice to them was do not succumb to the pressure of media or social expectations or to anyone else. Do not deny who you are. Celebrate. Celebrate, because that is a beautiful side of you that you've got. The Irish and the English. You can't give it up. Celebrate who you are and resist it with everything that you can and have inside of you. And you'll see during their journeys, they would, be tempted to go one way or tempted, but there was always that voice of the mother, which they probably hated at the time. Be true to yourself. Don't succumb to the pressure. Be yourself, because you're a great person on your own, the way you are. And if I may just say this, speaking about identity, if I could give them anything, I hope I have. And that is my faith, because in order to get beyond my hatred and my anger, Evalka said early on, what was my identity? My identity, you can't actually, with that filters, it distorts your identity. But I'm a woman of faith, and my identity is no longer and is not embedded in the race or in my culture. Um, my identity is embedded in in my theology, and which sets me free. So I think the hardest thing you can see on a person that suffered through race is that they carry the weight on their shoulders, and that in itself binds them, that they cannot be free. Um, and therefore they only hear one narrative. But there are many different stories out there. But because they only got a linear view of it, as I said early on, that is the only one they can hear. And by doing that, they nullify the experiences of the other people with their stories, which are all, we empathize and we understand and we sympathize. But there are so many different stories that need to be heard and need to be validated, and not a Nalba, this is the only way, the only story for that.
That's a really, really powerful answer. Thank you so much for sharing that, Deborah. I have one more question to ask this side, but Evalka, is there anything else that you wanted to pose on the back end of that?
No, I think you've touched upon a lot of stuff, and that that ideal of not conforming to what society has labeled you to be, has that wants you to conform into something so they can put you in a box in order so they can tick and they can move past and wrap you in a tiny bow and say this is who you are and that's comfortable for me, but it's not comfortable for who you are internally as a person. And you touched upon religion, and in fact I was doing some studying. I'm doing a master's in global cultures, and one of the key questions was, what is the role of religion and prayer in memory, in identity? And I think you touched upon it quite rightly in showing how we do form an identity through our religious practices, through our prayers, and that in itself brings and bridges a whole new community that we never knew before. So thank you for bringing that up, and it just connected with some of the research that I was just doing just the other day.
And it's really great that you mentioned, because my last question was really to be like, this has clearly been it is a very complex and sensitive kind of issue to discuss. And again, we're really thankful and grateful for your transparency and your honesty about what you've experienced. And by no means we take that lightly, and we respect it so deeply. And I think with such rich stories that you have and rich experiences that you have, what word of advice that would you give to encourage people to kind of move past some of these limitations that you've spoken about? How would you encourage people to kind of move forward in unity regarding issues of race? What can we do to find that way through?
Natasha, do you want to?
I have I don't know that I have an answer for that.
Any thoughts would be equally as welcome.
Okay. Mine is not a color, it's a culture struggle. So I struggle like most people. We have different cultures. They're different, and so. But what I have found for myself is the more comfortable someone is or firm in who they are, the more comfortable I am with them. So if I go to the A&E, I don't care how my doctor looks. If he's the best doctor there is, it doesn't quite matter to me who you are, where you're from, and what your grandma did last year. You're the best. And that's where I'll go. So the more grounded and confident, or not, and when I say the word confident, I don't mean loud. I mean just being someone is. I find that easier to navigate. Imposition of any form of culture or view into my space is a true offense to me. So I struggle from that. For each man, be the best man that you are. But imposition into, I struggle I daily with that. But yeah, so for me, it doesn't come down so much to it just comes down to every day be the best or be you, and I will work with you. I don't have an issue beyond that, unless it's a culture, it's a collective, which most people each way will have something to say about.
Thank you. Deborah?
That's a great answer, Natasha. I think luck is one of that for me. I think also depending on who you're dealing with, because we're not denying that there is this deep-rooted racism can be systemic in cultures or in societies as well. They can be there, but I think that's going to be a heart issue anyway, whatever you do. Because I'm out of a country with law and it's legal now, but it's a heart issue. It's a heart posture. And one of the things moving forward, I think Bishop Tutu said a great thing with the Truth and Reconciliation Committee in South Africa, if you know about that, if you've ever heard about that, to bring it out, because the whole, the success of apartheid is the divide and conquer. Because if you divide people and you keep it a mystery, you demythalize them when you bring them together and they realize they're just human. At some point, they see beyond the color of the skin and they see the person. And I think we need the opportunities to engage. And I love it if you go to school that is, because I love it when you go into a church and there's multicultures. I love it, that so it demytholizes the lie that is said about these people. One of the things in South Africa, in the books, the student study books, the textbooks in the school, in a coloured school was, when they were giving, quoting sayings and things like that, they would say as drunk as a coloured teacher in Afrikaans. So they put a stigma attached to it, because alcohol was a trade that they did initially, and they bound the coloured people in their work, and so they took control of that. So that was something. So that is a stigma that's that. So it's a lie, and it's out there. It's legally there in the textbooks, and you're going to answer a question. That is your answer. That I am coloured, and I'm an alcoholic, and I'm a this, and I'm uneducated. I'm not qualified, and all of those things. So when he had the Truth and Reconciliation Committee, that those lies were demytholized, which is important, and I think that is moving forward. I think there's got to be ownership also, ownership that we realize that racism impacts. There are no winners in racism. There's no winners in racism, because whether he has an artistic on him doesn't matter. He's also lost in the process. It doesn't matter what we do. And I'm going to say this again. I think the only thing that I found for myself that can bring down the walls was in South Africa, even churches were divided. You go into a church of your color. You can't go to mixed church. And so, and when they prayed, even they had to be different. So growing up, we were on the cutting edge of just the end of the apartheid time. And so our church was one of the first churches that was multicultural, multiracial. And that brought with it its own challenges. But the context of our faith was that our faith is able to bring down the walls, and that we can bridge our differences. When you work together, you start to see people for what they are. A liar is a liar, whether he's black, white, pink, or blue.
Had to go.
You understand? And so you see what we are when we work together, when we live together. And I think trying to create an environment where we can do that. And that is a personal thing, because it's an effort that has to be made on both sides to work through the uncomfortable situation, because it is uncomfortable when you don't know another culture, because we don't understand the culture. Like Natasha said, it's not a color thing, it becomes a cultural thing now, because you associate the color with the culture,
Actually,
so,
I have a question.
yes, babe.
The question is for you, Carla, for the two of you, actually. For you, Ivalka and Carla. This is about navigating what was law and never fully being able to explain it, because we lived it. And so, like onions, as the years go by, different things come up, etc., etc. So for us, what an idea of a bad situation is very different to what yours is, because you. So that same question that Carla asked, I asked to the two of you.
So
because you are in this society today.
Forward. Yeah, that is a good question.
Because Carla, and I'm asking you this because I am very comfortable on British soil. But the current climate, etc., doesn't show that comfort for, let's say, a person of color. And where do the two of you sit? Short answers, please. in that question.
Ivanka, would you like to go first?
Yeah, I think for me, I guess I share a similar experience to you both in the sense that I actually migrated to the UK quite recently in the last 10 years. So I've been exposed to a lot of things in regards to race, and how race is viewed, both in the Caribbean, but also coming into the British society. So in the Caribbean, it wasn't so much of a race issue, but a colorism issue. And that was interesting to navigate between, who the lighter skin individuals had more opportunities or were in spaces of power as opposed to the darker skin. And my family was quite a mixture of both light skin individuals and dark skinned individuals. So that was interesting to navigate. But when I came here, I guess I was already comfortable of who I am and my identity. So I was quite grounded as to what society came at me with. And I was quite happy in my own skin. I knew and I celebrated the fact that I was Black and I was able to enter into society and do as I please. But one thing that I found quite distinctive was I was actually faced with an issue of belonging, specifically within the Black communities in Britain. I was torn between, you know, Caribbean, British Caribbean, and then torn between Africans. And I remember going to university, and I was a part of the African Caribbean Society, and I did not feel like I belonged there. I think for me, there was so much of the conversation of carrying on the burden that our ancestors and ancestors
Yeah.
before went on. And I didn't feel comfortable continuing that generational cycle of oppression, of struggle. So I kind of wiped that off my back. And funnily enough, I have a friend who is now my really good friend after we've worked out our um, kind of disagreements, but she compared me, or she kind of likened me to a white person. Oh, you're not Black enough. You talk like white people, or you act like white people. And I was just like, what? And I was quite insulted because I was so happy being Black, being Caribbean, and having the opportunity to live in such a multicultural space, and having the, I guess, citizenship to reside in the UK. So for me, it was a lot of conflicting between, do I belong with the British Caribbeans? Do I belong with the British Africans? Am I it was no longer so much per se my skin color, but in fact a cultural issue that I found, which still exists today. But what I found more of racial element was within the workplace. I was very much aware to feel or be the only Black person, or um, going up the performance ladder. And it was clear to see that as I excelled in my career, there was not many people that started to look like me. And that was quite damaging to my hope, I guess, in regards to navigating those spaces and, where do I see myself? But I guess it was a reconditioning of my mindset that that is not my struggle. That's not my oppression to continue to carry on. How do I, as an example, break that cycle and be the one and be that inspiration for others? So that was a little bit about my experience.
Well
Over to
Excellent.
done.
you, Carl. Thank
I
you.
mean, I feel like, where do we go from there? Thanks, Ivanka. Excellent. It's so interesting. I think for myself, I think being someone who's from a mixed family, also from a migrant family, but also holding British citizenship here, has been a journey. I think I had no real understanding of the tension until I got older, and the comprehension, just the lights would turn on at different seasons. Because I've got to say that at no time or place did I ever feel that my skin tone or even my cultural background, which dangles between more than one culture, if we're going to talk about it that way, was a hindrance to me walking in any of the opportunities that I aspire to, whether it's going for jobs, going for places at university, and they, if I may say, these were deemed as elite institutions according to league tables. But not once did I ever feel that the way that I was perceived, I was there on my merit of effort, and I worked hard to get there. Not once did it consider in my mind that my skin tone is the thing that was an obstacle for me. But understanding as I grew up that was not the experience of others certainly made me more aware that there is, because it's, even though it's not my experience, thankfully, that is my privilege. But in the same breath, it's not shared by everybody else. But I think because of my openness, and maybe what helped me as my privilege of not being so aware of those boxes, of some of those painful oppressions that people had experienced, I felt a lot freer to engage with other cultures at a really frequent basis and still feel very much, this is who I am, and I bring that to the table. I'm interested in you. And people's response has always been really positive. And I think this probably leans towards Deborah's point, who said it earlier on. I think in order to move forward, I think that has been almost my superpower, is people from many different cultures have felt comfortable to speak to me as a bridge. And I feel the only way to do that is to, I think, just a heart posture of willingness to want to engage in those conversations and to be patient and to be compassionate. And I cannot be disregarding. I cannot claim someone else's experience or invalidate theirs by saying just because I didn't experience it doesn't mean that it didn't happen. And I think in my awareness and even doing conversations like this, I feel I'm in this space where I'm working towards building that unity in trying to approach these types of conversations, which I think are so important.
So thank you both, Natasha and Deborah, for an informative discussion about your experience, the connection with race, identity, belonging. I think throughout the conversation, we touched upon some key themes, such as, this identity is multidimensional, and therefore we should not be, looked at, in a unilateral way. And therefore we also have so many exciting and interesting parts of us that makes us who we are as an individual, and that therefore should be embraced. And your thoughts and comments around conformity, I think everyone should take advice and stock of society, and how society has a condition of putting us into boxes and putting us into little segments that makes us feel that we don't belong anywhere really, and that we're claimed by the nation state or whoever. So thank you so much for all of the conversations, your transparency, your honesty, and I hope that our conversations can settle within our audience, and that they can also feel some sort of resemblance to what we've discussed, and if not, take advice from our discussion today. So we're really appreciative of having you both on our Connect and Conversations platform, and we hope to see you soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.